Let's speak to Brian Crombie, who is with us via Skype. Brian, welcome to the show. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Yourself?
Very good, very good. Thank you. It's very interesting to find out that you're also running as a candidate, but most importantly, we would like to know about the party and why you are not part of any of the mainstream party and you're going with this party and running from the Mississauga Lakeshore riding.
Well, I've become very disillusioned with the main parties, quite frankly. I had an article, a column published in the Toronto Sun last Sunday, and I've gotten a lot of very positive reaction to it, which comments that I think that the Conservative Party has moved to the right, to the extreme right, and I think that the Liberal Party, which I used to be part of, has moved to the left, and it's left a gaping hole in the center of the political spectrum. And I'm a fiscal conservative, a social progressive, and I really believe that that's where the vast majority of people are, and I don't think anyone represents us today. I think that the political party system is broken. The local representatives don't really represent you anymore. They do what the leader and the party and the whip tell them to do. They don't do what the local populists want you to do. And I strongly believe in the principles of the none of the above party, which is for referendum, recall, or term limits, and proportional representation. Angus Reid came out with a poll last week that said that the turnout in this election might be the lowest in history. And if turnout is so low, that tells you that people really are disillusioned. They're not happy with the choices that we've got. They're thinking that people aren't listening to them, and they're not going to go out and vote. The turnout for people under the age of 30 is 20%. 20%. The turnout for people above the age of 60 is 80%. And so the problem is that I think that the politicians are catering to the people that vote for obvious reasons, which is the older people, and not necessarily younger people. Turnout in ethnic minorities is far lower than it is in people that have been in Canada their whole life and for generations. So again, I think that people, the political parties end up doing what not necessarily is the right thing or what the populace wants, but what the voters want. And if you think about that, we may have like 55% turnout, and as you've been talking, maybe the Conservatives win 40% of the vote. 40% times 55 is not much more than, lucky if you get a third of the people in the province are actually electing a majority government, which is absurd. Yeah. That's not right, and that doesn't even count all the people that can't vote because they're too young, or they're not citizens yet. So I think it's wrong, and I think that we've got the old adage from the movie Network about I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. The chances that I get elected obviously are low, but what I want to do is I want to make a statement. I want to make a statement that our political system is broken and we got to work for some improvement.
Very good. And so viewers might have not caught the name of the party. So what's the name of the party?
The name of the party is the None of the Above Direct Democracy Party. And it stands, as I mentioned, for direct democracy. And it stands for 4 R's. Referendum, which 50 countries around the world have referendum, and they work. I actually met someone out on the doorstep today from Switzerland, and they loved the idea that every year they would get a booklet with all the different referendum policies that they had to vote on. Recall or term limit, and I think that's key, that you've got to have a way of getting rid of bad politicians. And right now, if a politician isn't doing the job and they're in your riding and you want to vote for that party, there's no way of getting rid of them. Often if they're incumbents, they end up getting the nominations. And you think about one of the things in the United States that is well run is their primary system. Even if you're an incumbent, you can have people run against you. And there's no restrictions on who can run. In Canada, for political parties, it's a little club. You got to apply to the club. They have their own rules. They're not based on any constitution that we've got from the country. It's only the constitution of that little club. And they decide, and often the leader decides, and it's friends of the leader, or they've got a quota system, or whatnot. So we've got a very unopen nomination process versus what would be a far better system like the primary system in the United States. And then proportional representation. Let me give you one statistic if I could.
Yeah.
In the last federal election, Liberals were getting elected in urban Toronto with below 40% of the vote because of splits. Conservatives were getting elected in rural Alberta with 55-60% of the vote because there weren't splits and lots of people voted. And as you probably know, the Conservatives actually won the popular vote, but won less seats. If you go through the math, a Liberal vote actually counted for 1.5 of the Conservative votes in Alberta. A Liberal vote in Toronto counted for 1.5 times a Conservative rural vote in Alberta. That's not one person, one vote. And if you actually told people that we have a system that magnifies a urban Liberal voter by 50% and minimizes a Conservative rural voter by 50%, people would go crazy. But for some reason, we just sort of accept it. But it's wrong. And, just the fact that you said that, the Conservatives could get a majority government with 39-40%, that's wrong. You shouldn't get a majority government with 39-40%. You should get 40% of the seats, period. That's it.
So this whole system needs to be kind of, rebirth. I mean, the way you're explaining it, it's very interesting and unique. So tell me a little bit more about who are the founders and who are the other members running in this election from this party?
Well, Greg Vesna is a gentleman that's been involved in politics for over 50 years, and he's written a book called Democracy A, which is really quite a good critique of our political system, and he's running in Mississauga Centre. And there's different people running in 40 different ridings around the country and around the province. So not in every riding, regrettably, but in a lot. And what we're trying to do is make a statement. And in addition to the statement that we're making on the electoral system and what's wrong with it, we're also, I think, making a lot of good comments from a policy standpoint. And if I could, I'd like to mention some of them. Because the number one issue, I believe, in this election is affordability. And the political parties, they haven't addressed it. And it's not affordability just for people at the very low end, which is something that the NDP and somewhat the Liberals have addressed in social housing, but it's affordability for everyone. My kids couldn't afford to buy a home in Mississauga. They're going to be looking, in the 705 or 519. The housing situation, and it's not just low interest rates. A lot of people just blame it on low interest rates, and clearly low interest rates have led to a high asset values in everything, whether it be the stock market and or real estate. But I think it is municipal and provincial governments that have really failed us. We have been building 50,000 less homes in the Greater Toronto Area than we need. We have a population the size of Montreal, 1.5 to 2 million people moving to the Greater Toronto Area in the next 10 years. Where are they going to live? We're not building enough. And it's the zoning rules and regulations and official plans and the processes and bureaucracy and red tape put in place by the provincial government and even more so the municipal government, where there is more regulation in the real estate business than in almost any other industry I've been involved in. I've been involved in the beer industry. I've been involved in the amusement park industry. I've been involved in the pharmaceutical industry. I've been involved in alternative energy industry. There's more regulation in real estate, and there's more petty involvement by local politicians and local planning people than you could, if you're not in the industry, you couldn't. They will tell you how many parking spaces you've got to have, how many bike racks you've got to have, what the height's got to be, what the mix of suites have got to be, what the materials have got to be on the, if people had that kind of involvement in your restaurant or in your product that you're manufacturing, people would go crazy. People don't realize how much regulatory influence we've got. And the local councillor runs their ward like a fiefdom, like a lord, and can veto a development. And so what that does is it adds 3 to 5 years of time, and a lot of them never get approved. And then they had to go to something called the OLT, the Ontario Land Tribunal. Over 97% of all of the appeals by cities to the Ontario Land Tribunal fail. The developers win, which says that cities are acting like little kids, and they're not actually living up to what they've got to do, and they're not building the kind of development that they need. And then let me, if I could, give you one more. Fiscal sustainability. I think a lot of people are worried that we may be heading to a recession. We have all the right sort of, we have low unemployment, we have high inflation that has gone up and still continues to go up. Interest rates are going to probably go up on Wednesday by another 50 basis points. 4 out of 5 times that the Bank of Canada tries to have a soft landing, they fail, and we end up having a recession, a hard landing. And I worry that we just don't. The cupboards are bare. The Liberals and the Conservatives have left the cupboards bare. We are the most indebted subnational government in North America. We've got more debt to GDP or to provincial GDP than any other subnational state or province in all of North America. It's unsustainable. And the Conservative budget that was announced just before the election wasn't a Liberal budget. It wasn't fiscally conservative. It had deficits continue for almost 10 years and debt ballooning as a percent of GDP. And debt to GDP just kept on going up. So I think fiscal sustainability is a real issue, and we need to attack it. And we've got one party in this election that's calling for a 2-point decline in GST. That's the worst thing you could do. Keynes and Keynesian economics, whether you agree with it or not, he argued when things are overheating, you take the punch bowl away, which is effectively what the central bank is doing by increasing interest rates. By decreasing the GST or the HST by 2 points, which is what the new Ontario party is recommending, you're spiking the punch bowl. You're making it worse. And that's the worst possible, that's the absolute worst possible thing we could do at this time. So I think fiscal sustainability is a real issue. And I could go on, I could talk about the long-term care. I could talk about climate change. It's a travesty, I think, what's happening in the country. And what the main parties are doing, I firmly believe, is using gimmicks to try to buy our votes because they don't think any of us are smart enough to really pay attention or take the time to pay attention. So they offer us $1 a beer or $1 a ride or no sticker fees or no tolls or this simplistic thing about answering the long-term care issue about getting rid of for-profit long-term care. If you look at any analysis, the mortality, which was terrible, it was a travesty and a tragedy during the pandemic. Something like 78% of all the people that passed away during COVID-19 passed away in long-term care. So it was just terrible. But whether it was for-profit or not for-profit had nothing to do with mortality. Good HVAC systems, good ventilation, really good regulations, and interesting enough, whether or not there were long-term full-time employees at the long-term care facility. After SARS, we had a judicial inquiry in Ontario as to what went wrong in SARS, and they came forward with a bunch of recommendations. None of them were followed by either Liberal or Conservative parties. And one of them was, it is the temporary, the part-time contract worker that goes from long-term care facility, long-term care facility, long-term care facility, that took SARS through them all, and that took COVID through them all. So it's how well you pay your employees ends up being really key, and do you give them full-time jobs or part-time jobs? And the other thing about that judicial inquiry is it said we should have respirators and ventilators on stock in inventory. We should have PPE. We should have masks. And we all know that 2 years ago, around this time, we were scrambling for all that. You know what the provincial government did? Didn't oil the ventilators, didn't maintain the respirators, didn't keep the domestic production of PPE. Everything that they said we needed to learn from SARS, 2003.
You're right. I mean,
19 years ago.
We could have learned a lot.
We forgot. Yeah. So it's I think that government in Ontario has failed us, and the fact that it's not a vast majority, but almost a majority of people, probably 45%, maybe 40% of the population, of not the population, of electors, aren't even going to show up and bother to vote, tells you that we've got a problem in our system. And if the 20% of young people that are voting today grow up and continue that rate, just think about what the vote's going to be like in the future. And I'll give you one last point of view, if I could. I think that I disagreed with a lot of the people that participated in the trucker convoy, but I thought they deserved a voice. Based on polls, 15 to 20% of Canadians actually agreed with some of what, or a lot of what the trucker convoy people had to say. That's 4.5 million people. 4.5 million people deserve to be heard, deserve a voice. If you had proportional representation, Maxime Bernier's CPC party would have had, because he got like 6 to 8% in the last election, they would have had 25 to 30 seats in our parliament. They would have had a voice. They would have known it was a small voice, but they would have at least had a voice. And when you don't have a voice, when you're not being heard, you know what you do? You go and protest. And you block streets and you get mad because everyone deserves a voice, and our governments didn't listen to that voice, and we don't have that voice represented in our legislature or our parliament, and I think it's a mistake. And I think that the Green Party is another example, one on the right the Green Party on the left. The Green Party got 4 to 6%. They should have had, 8 to 10 seats in the parliament. They only have 1. So the environmental voice is also quieted. And the opposite is also true. What it does is it takes the voice of the main parties that are only in the 35 to 40% range.
Suppresses everybody else.
It makes it bigger. So it quashes minority voices and it magnifies plurality voices, which is wrong. That's not right.
Very good. No, thank you so much, Brian, and wish you all the best. And I know a lot of people probably would agree with you that electoral reforms needs to happen in Canada as well. And this may be a way out. We don't know. Maybe there is other side of this story. But thank you so much, and wish you all the best as you run.
I apologize. Do I have time to tell you about myself at all?
Yep, I can give you 60 seconds.
So I'm a long-term business person. I've graduated from Harvard Business School. I worked for the Walt Disney Company in Los Angeles, for Jim Pattison in Vancouver, for Molson's and Bioville in Toronto and Mississauga and Montreal. I'm now CEO of a real estate development company. There's too many career politicians and lawyers in Queen's Park. I think you need a business person like me. I've been involved in the community. I was the chairman and founder of the Mississauga City Summit, asked to do that by the former mayor of Mississauga, Hazel McCallion. I did that for 7 years. And then I was president of the Mississauga Arts Council for 7 years. And I now am chairman of a civic advocacy organization for all of the GTA called Transit Alliance. And finally, I've had the privilege over the last couple of years of hosting a show on Canada One TV and on Saga 960 AM. And in that regard, I've interviewed over 1,000 people. And I've learned and listened what a lot of people got to say. So I think I've got, some skills that could benefit Mississauga Lakeshore.
I certainly agree with you. I mean, definitely some career politicians also needs to be there, but we're missing the business people.
No, we don't need career politicians.
Business people are certainly required, because the business sense has to be the 101 for anything that we want to move Ontario forward. So thank you so much, Brian, and wish you all the best
the time. Thank
for the riding of Mississauga Lakeshore.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.